Thanks so much for joining me, and thanks for that amazing introduction, Larissa, and for all the information. You know, this is one of my all-time favorite recipes. I grew up eating chili, rice, and corn with my family at least once or twice a week. And for a long time, I didn't think I could have it on a raw food diet until I started playing with the recipe and figuring out fun stuff like this. So I hope you guys are all prepared, have all your ingredients washed and ready, you know, have your cutting board out and your blender ready so we can make this all together. Now, I do want to remind you, if I'm going too fast, or if you have any questions about what I'm doing, or any questions at all in general with the recipe, then put your hand up and ask that question, and we'll do our absolute best to quench your thirst for knowledge and get it all set up. And otherwise, at the end, hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to ask a couple other questions and show our recipes and have a whole bunch of fun. So without further ado, maybe we'll just jump right into the recipe. So right now we're gonna start with Roma tomatoes. And I apologize, my cats just broke out. Okay, so we have cats that broke out, and hopefully they will not be jumping all over this, otherwise I'll have to pin them away. So we're gonna start with beautiful Roma tomatoes. Roma tomatoes are one of my absolute favorite to make really nice thick sauces and to make chunky salsas, deep kind of earthy flavor. They usually have a little bit less water content than other types of tomatoes, so that's what really makes them a perfect sauce tomato. Oh, I'm gonna have to be fighting off cats here. I really apologize, guys. So with these Roma tomatoes, what we're gonna do to start this chili mission is cut them in half. What I usually like to do with the Roma tomatoes is chop off the top section that has the stem end. So I'm chopping them roughly in half. And the part with the stem end, I'll just cut into quarters. So there you go. You can see we just have 4 pieces, and we'll put that right in the blender. And the other portion of the tomato, the bottom part of the tomato, I'll use a nice sharp knife. Sometimes for tomatoes, if you don't have a really, really sharp knife, it's good to use a serrated one. And we're gonna cut that up into a fine dice. So you can go ahead and start chopping up all of your tomatoes, cutting the tops off again to throw in the blender, and cutting off the bottoms into a dice, almost like you're making a pico de gallo, or like a nice salsa. There we go. Jump down, kitty. I'm gonna let them outside and leave them outside for the duration of the show. We have a little cat balcony over here, and they love to be outside. So we'll use that. And over here I have my nice big bowl, so we'll put our tomatoes in there. We have approximately 6 tomatoes here, and 150 grams, I believe that I have. Yeah, no, sorry, 690 grams. So about 1.5 pounds of Roma tomatoes. Now, of course, this is a pretty tomato-rich recipe, being a chili, nice and thick and chunky. Got the diced tomatoes and the sliced, or the blended tomatoes for the actual sauce. I always find that tomatoes actually make the dish. If you have really good quality tomatoes, it's going to be a really rich and savory chili. And if your tomatoes just taste like water, like the dead of winter, then it's not going to be the best, and it may be a better idea to focus on a different ingredient, or otherwise really shop around and try and find the best tomatoes. Some of the best tomatoes that you can get in the winter are going to be hothouse. At least that's what I find here in Canada. If anyone has any different experience, you can let us know, and we can discuss that kind of fun with tomatoes. For example, I know Dr. Doug Graham, he's pretty close to an amazing, amazing tomato grower in England, and gets some of the best tomatoes I've ever had in my life. With that, this is just one of those perfect dishes for the summer and for the fall, when tomatoes are just bopping off in your garden. Doesn't get much better than growing your own in your own garden. So there we are, we're almost half done, these tomatoes. We're just throwing everything in the bowl, get it all ready. Does anyone have any favorite types of tomatoes? My personal favorite. Sorry?
Campari.
Ooh, Camparis are delicious. And those are great ones that are typically hothouse grown out here. We can get those in those little silo packs.
I love Camparis too, and grape tomatoes.
Grape tomatoes are amazing. Is that Sherry?
Shari, yes, Chris, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Great to hear you.
Nice to see you.
Chris, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So it's about what you say about half you chopping for the chili and half goes to the blender, right?
Yep, exactly. And
okay, good.
And I usually, in most recipes, not only this one, but in most recipes, I like to really chop off the top stem end for the blender. That way, you know, you don't get that little hard bit that's on the stem in the dish itself. And I usually like to blend it, you know, instead of throwing it away. Some people always cut them out. Instead, I just always use that as the blended portion. You know, what my two favorite types of tomatoes, one, heirloom tomatoes, specifically the purple Cherokees or the green zebras. And then I also just love early girl tomatoes. If anyone's had early girl tomatoes, oh, they just explode in your mouth. I'm actually kind of curious to hear what Dr. Graham's favorite type of tomato is.
Chris, I mean, you know, it's the one I'm eating at the moment is my favorite, but yeah. But if I was gonna have to choose, I would choose almost any of the chocolate beef type tomatoes, the brown beef, coeur de boeuf they're called, and they're just, oh my gosh, they're just amazing to me. It's something about it. The brown tomatoes just have so much flavor. But
would the Cherokee be in there? Is that a brown tomato for you?
Is that a brown tomato? I didn't hear the last word. Brown tomato preview?
Would the Cherokee be a brown tomato too? Like that's or like it's like a really dark reddish brown?
Yeah, sort of. Is that almost like half and half?
Yeah, it's kind of got, it's like dark brown, kind of black stripes almost.
Right, and there's some now that are even completely black. They're just astonishing, black tomatoes. But I would also agree with you that the lemon tiger is hard to beat. That green lemon tiger is a tough tomato to beat.
Man, they're so darn good, right? There's that perfect balance of sweetness and acidity and all that good stuff.
It wouldn't work in this recipe. And that's where, but it wouldn't work in this recipe. And that's where choosing plum tomatoes for this recipe makes all the sense in the world.
Absolutely. Knowing your ingredients and knowing which ones to put in there makes all the difference.
Although
so we're going to jump into the next. Go ahead.
I might put some Camparis in that recipe too, though.
Absolutely. You know, sometimes I use little teeny cherries or grape tomatoes and just chop them in half, you know, and have them all mixed up and have different colors in there too. But, you know, to me, the Roma is like old reliable, especially for Italian or for thick kind of tomato sauces.
Chris knows his tomatoes.
I don't mess around. I tell you, when I'm in Costa Rica sometimes, I'm eating 25 kilos of tomatoes a week. So we're going to jump into the next ingredient here. So we have a red pepper. This is actually 1/2 of a red pepper because we have 115 grams. And, you know, red peppers are just ripe green peppers, right? So if you're looking and you find only green peppers, better to let them ripen and let them get red here. So
that's more grams than my whole family.
It's more grams. It is. That is true. Bless the grams. Bless the grams. So we're going to take this red pepper and we're going to chop off just a little bit of the ends and throw that in the blender. Just those kind of tougher looking bits that don't look quite as presentable, maybe around the stem end. And that'll give the sauce an even more diverse, rich flavor. And we're just going to do the same thing to the pepper as we did with the tomato and flatten it. Sometimes that really helps. You can squish it and cube it. So I usually find that I like to put the skin side up on the pepper and make sure you have a really sharp knife. Otherwise, it might be really difficult to get through. Nothing like cutting a whole bunch of pepper or onion or something like that that has that thin skin and then find out that you didn't actually cut it. So we'll turn those strips sideways and then we can just slice them into small cubes. I'll show you, you can use this other knife too, but it requires a little more pressure. The serrated knife occasionally, if you don't have a really sharp chef knife, is nice and easier. There we go. So we have this beautiful red pepper, and we'll just put that all into the bowl as well. Missing some pieces. Some are jumping around. And speeding along next, we'll get into this beautiful zucchini. And for this one, this is 115 grams, or 100 grams actually. And for mine, that was just 1/2 of a zucchini. Any type of zucchini will do. You can use the kind of lighter colored ones or these darker ones, preferably organic. You don't need to peel it or anything like that. And all we're gonna do, you guessed it, is kind of the same kind of motion. We're just gonna cube this as well. So I'm gonna slice this down the side. Now a trick that I like to do sometimes if I know how thick of a slice I want is just to take the knife and just hold it on the cutting board and just slide it through at a uniform thickness. It helps a lot if your handle of your knife is nice and square. If it's rounded, it can be a little bit more difficult, but it can be a nice little trick to get a uniform cut. So we're gonna cut them into long strips. So all I did then is cut it from end to end in a long strip. How's everyone doing here? Is everyone enjoying cutting this up? Is everyone kind of at the same pace with me, or am I going a little bit too fast?
It's a pleasure to cut vegetables on Sundays.
It is, right? It's nice and relaxing. You can be standing here with our knees lightly bent, just breathing and relaxing. I think that sometimes is a really important thing to do to set up, and I could have actually mentioned that at the very beginning, but before we start chopping and when we're getting into the kitchen, to just take a couple easy breaths, relax, bend our knees a little bit, relax our shoulders, roll them around, roll our neck around, and just come into a calm, balanced state. So we're preparing our food from that energy and just putting our love into it. If we're all tense and angry and doing other stuff, distracted, it's going to reflect in the food a little bit. So we have all these beautiful little zucchini cubes. Now, an extra little tidbit. When I make chili, I have like 3 or 4 different versions, and some of them are really simple and I can make them in like 10 minutes. And other versions, I take a half an hour, 2 hours. The more complex it is, the more I'm playing with dehydration and other stuff like that. And one thing I do sometimes is I chop these zucchini just like this, maybe a teeny bit bigger of a cube, and then I dehydrate them just for about a half an hour, 45 minutes, so that they shrink up a little bit and get a little bit of a skin on the surface, so that the flavor is just a little bit different. The texture is just a little bit different. Depends really what I'm looking for. Today I really just wanted to make a simple, fresh, quick chili. You could make it any time and serve right off as soon as you finished making it. That's a fun little trick. So next what we're gonna do is take our little mushrooms. Now I have 4 cremini mushrooms. These are typically my personal favorite, which they're actually just baby portobello mushrooms. They're baby bellas, cremini. And a little trick or tip is if you have any of the dirt or any of the ickiness on your mushrooms, instead of washing them because they're very porous and they'll suck up that water, just use a napkin or a clean cloth. When I'm in the kitchen, I usually like to have a clean cloth on my side so that I can, wipe stuff off, or if I'm not using mushrooms or stuff, just wipe my hands between. But we're gonna take these little bellas. I've already washed them with a little cloth, and we're just gonna chop them up into cubes as well. So I just like to cut off the stem ends and throw them in there, cut them in half. And I'll cube these into at least 9 pieces each, if not more. I usually like a little bit bigger chunks of mushrooms. If you like smaller chunks, you can chop them down into smaller pieces. Mushrooms are also another one of those ingredients that for me, I like to usually actually dehydrate them just a half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. So I might just chop them up and throw them in the dehydrator. And that way they kind of intensify the flavor. They shrink down a little bit. And it's a really nice trick. I've met a lot of people who say, you know what? I don't really love mushrooms. And when I serve them to them, when I dehydrate them a little bit, or if I marinate them a little bit, they say, oh, you know what? Now I actually like mushrooms. And a neat factoid about mushrooms is they're the only, or one of the only plant foods that contains vitamin D. So that's kind of nice in the winter months if we're not getting out in the sun as much. I tend to include mushrooms a little more often, and you can actually multiply the amount of vitamin D found in the mushroom by putting it either in the sunlight for up to 12 hours, gill side up, or you can put it under a UVB lamp. You can actually just get a very simple, inexpensive UVB lamp for growing plants or for a reptile. And that way, when you put it underneath that lamp for a couple hours before using it, it can multiply the vitamin D content up to 400%, which would mean that about 4 to 6 mushrooms, like a handful of mushrooms, can actually effectively be a vitamin D2 supplement. Now I say D2 because we convert sunlight into vitamin D3. That's our main source of vitamin D, but vitamin D2 does work as well. So I love mushrooms.
Krista, I have a question for you.
Awesome.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I'm from Russia, and in Russia we usually peel our mushrooms.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to peel that little skin off. It peels very easily. Do you recommend that, or what's your opinion on that?
You know, I personally don't bother peeling it. I know some people do. And to me, it really just comes down to your own personal comfort. Mushrooms are grown in an environment that I understand why some people would want to peel them. Myself, has never been something I've concerned myself with. Instead, you know, I've just wiped them off. And truthfully, too, most of the mushrooms we get here, they already seem very clean. You know, I've been to some places where the mushrooms actually look quite dirty, and then I'd be more prone to want to peel them. But if I'm just cooking for myself, and if the mushrooms look clean, then I just, you know, wipe them off myself.
My experience with peeling, Larissa, has more to do with the delivery preference that you want, the texture that you hope to have. If you're going to do something, if you're going to prepare the mushroom in a way where the skin is likely to become tough, then it's much nicer to peel them. So for instance, if you're making a stuffed mushroom or little individual stuffed mushrooms, it's very nice to peel them first, because it's otherwise you get a piece of skin that's rather coarse and tough and doesn't want to break up, where the rest of the mushroom is very soft. But if you're going to do it the way Chris is doing here, where he's adding it into a wet mixture anyway, and he's hoping it's going to be absorbent, then leaving that skin on works just fine, and the skin will soften so much that you almost won't know it's there.
Thank you. So next we have some green onions. Now, green onions are a little bit of a more mild onion. And what I'm gonna do is just chop off the ends. They're a little bit icky. I can throw those in the blender and finely chop them. So I just have the 2 green onions side by side. And I'll use my hand as a guide to go along and just chop them nice and finely. This is about 20 grams of green onion. I always find
Fine job, Chris. Sorry.
Thank you.
Fine.
Look at that. Look at that. I've got some cutting skills. So I always find that it's helpful to have both the amount as well as the weight and consider each. I usually do have a kitchen scale, especially if I'm making a recipe for the first time, or if I'm making it in quantity for bigger groups and stuff like that. Because, you know, the recipe might say, you know, 2 green onions, but you might go to the store and get green onions that are 20 grams each when the recipe's calling for 20 grams, and it can change the whole flavor of the dish. And I tell you, you know, I've chefed groups up to 650 people. If you're off by 20 grams, if you're off by double, it costs a lot more money and it makes the recipe go crazy. So it's really helpful to use both the grams as well as the count. So there we go. So I'm just gonna give these a rough chop as well, so we don't have a whole bunch of O's, onion O's. If you don't like spicy flavor, if you don't like onion, you don't have to put it in there. You know, this is an optional ingredient technically, as I generally find things like hot peppers and onions always are. You can play around with it. So that's a nice little chop. I might leave a little bit for garnish, and we'll just put that in there. So the bottoms of the green onions, the white part, you get to decide. If they're too strong for you, don't include them. If you like the onion flavor, you like a little bit of that, that bitter flavor, which is truthfully a nice tip for rounding out sauces, having a little bit of a bitter flavor in there, a pungent, strong flavor. I just loosely chopped up that green onions bulb and throwing that in the blender as well. Just gonna wash my hand off. There we go. Wipe it on my little towel. And the next ingredient we have is another optional one, and that is sprouted lentils. So if you didn't sprout your lentils, that is absolutely fine. Just add them in hard and raw. No, definitely don't add them in hard and dry. That's not good. So sprouted lentils are really easy to do. All I did is I soaked them overnight, and then I put them in a colander or a strainer. And twice a day, I rinsed them off really well and kind of stirred them up a little bit so the bottom gets around to the top, and covered them so that the kitties don't lick them, right? And twice a day, you just wash them and make sure that they stay a little bit moist, and they start to sprout. So these ones I sprouted starting on Friday night. Friday night, I soaked them, and then all day Saturday, I rinsed them twice, and this morning I rinsed them again. I usually make more than I need, because then I can put some in the fridge, or a neat trick too is you can put them in portion sizes and throw them in the freezer. And that way, you know, whenever you need to use them, you just take them out and let them soften. And it's kind of neat because they actually do soften a whole bunch and they taste almost more like a cooked lentil. These guys here are perfect and ready. This is 1/2 of a cup of sprouted lentils, which would have started around 1/3 or 1/4 cup of, it would have started around 1/8 to 1/4 cup of dried lentils, depending on how long you sprout them. So I'm just gonna mix that into there. Sprouted lentils are really high in amino acids, essential amino acids and or protein. Some amino acids that aren't quite as high in other cooked or other raw foods rather. I don't really eat them for that reason myself. I went 10 years on a raw food diet without really ever having lentil sprouts, but I do love to use them in specific recipes like chili or a sprouted lentil dal, or even blended into some of the sauce for making burgers, which gives it a really kind of authentic flavor. So we have all those ingredients in there, and we can just stir it up. Let's mix it all nice and well, and check that out. The flavors are already mingling and the smells are divine. Oh, wow.
Hey, Chris,
Coats all the vegetables. Sorry?
Can I ask you a question?
Please do.
I don't want to mislead anybody, and you're right that mushrooms can pick up some vitamin D, although you'd have to eat a lot of mushrooms to get much vitamin D at all. But in order to do that, they have to have sun exposure, or as you say, you know, an ultraviolet light. So
yeah.
So your comment that between October and April, when the sun isn't very strong, you're tending to eat more mushrooms to get the vitamin D. Why would the mushrooms have vitamin D during those months? Where'd they get it?
Because again, what I do is I actually have a UVB lamp in my house,
Right, that's what we're
So,
saying. If you put the
yeah.
if you put the D in, that's another way of getting it for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that is the amount of vitamin D in the mushrooms before exposing them to UVB light is it's not insignificant, but it's not enough to rely upon for your vitamin D needs. But if you
Sure.
actually do eat mushrooms about twice a week, like I said, about 4 to 6 mushrooms and expose them to the UVB light, it's not that I would say don't even get checked out, but it definitely has the potential to boost your vitamin D levels to a safe zone.
And that's good news, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'd personally myself rather eat mushrooms because I love them, and utilize that information by putting them under the UVB lamp rather than take a supplement. And I'm not saying that I would never take a supplement, because I have taken a vitamin D supplement when I broke my leg, and I wanted to make sure I had absolute enough for healing. But all the other years on the raw food diet, the other 16 years, if I was in the winter here, I've been eating a little bit more mushrooms, at least really the last 8 years. So we have this beautiful mix. Thanks, Doc. That's a good point, because yeah, you don't want to just assume mushrooms by themselves have enough. So here we have in the blender the little bit of red pepper, the tomatoes, and the green onion bulbs. To that, we're going to add some date. Now, some people would prefer not to mix date and tomatoes, and truthfully, I don't like to in big quantities. In food combining, mixing acid fruits and sweet fruits is a no-no and can cause digestive duress. What I've found is ratios do come into play. So for example, if this is 75, 85, 90% tomatoes and I add a little bit of date, I usually don't notice anything at all. In one recipe, when I was trying to make a sweet and sour sauce for a Chinese dish, I had almost half and half volume dates to tomatoes, and I tell you, I was lifting curtains, and it wasn't the best thing, So just use a little bit of date. We have on the docket 2 dates for 40 grams, I do believe. Yep. So we can start with 1.5 or 1, depending upon your desired sweetness. I usually like to have my chili a little sweet, so I'm actually going to go with the full recipe. I've made this many times before. So that's 2 dates. Another option, if you don't want to go that route, is instead to use something like mango or nectarine, a sub-acid fruit that may combine a little bit better if your digestion is at all sensitive to this combination. And we have the 2 tablespoons of chili powder. Now, I will mention that in most countries I've been to outside of Canada, chili powder is just ground chili. And that's not what we're looking for. That's why on the ingredient list, it had a recipe for chili powder. Now, I want to let you know that we're not using all of that chili powder. If you made the chili powder on the side with the smoked paprika or sweet paprika, garlic powder, cayenne pepper, oregano, and onion powder, dried oregano, and cumin, that is just for a little batch of chili powder on the side, and you'd only take 2 tablespoons of that to put into the sauce. Otherwise, you can just use paprika or smoked paprika. We'll give it kind of more of that chili flavor. But I tell you, this chili mix, it has a little bit of a kick. You can use less cayenne pepper or no cayenne pepper if you want, and just substitute that for the paprika. And it really makes the dish, it makes it taste authentic. So I'm gonna put that in there. You could have an optional hot pepper if you like it spicy. I have a little habanero here, which I just wanted to show you, but I'm actually not gonna use it today. I usually don't use super hot peppers unless I have a fat source in my dish to kind of cream it out and mellow the heat of the flavor. So instead, I'm just gonna leave it as is. I have here a 1/2 cup, I believe, of sun-dried, 1/4 cup of sun-dried tomatoes. No, it's a 1/2 cup, I was lying. So we do have a 1/2 cup of sun-dried tomatoes. And if you like, you can just add half of that to start, because you never know how watery your tomatoes are and how thick it's gonna make the sauce. So we'll just throw half in there. If you don't have a lot of sun-dried tomatoes, another neat trick for thickening up a tomato sauce is to add a tablespoon of flax seeds. That can be really nice. So blend this up. Starting low, going high. If you want, you can use the tamper. You may not need it. it's everywhere. Wow, that just smells magnificent. I hope everyone is experiencing the same kind of thing. So I'm actually going to use all of the pepper and throw that in there. And put that on top so that if there's any spillage, it goes right in there. And you can add some oregano and dried basil to taste. If you have a little herb garden, you know, you can add that in last and just have a little bit of that freshness, those green colors on. You can even julienne or really thinly slice the basil and sprinkle it on top. That can look really nice. Just bring a little bit extra of those two in there. At this time, of course, too, if you like, you can taste it. You know, use your own little spoon and taste a bit to see if you want to add a little bit more date, or if you want to add even an optional bit of lemon juice to kind of spike the flavors out a little bit. When I was talking earlier about the bitter flavor, that's a really big tip for making sauces. Is a really good sauce utilizes at least 4 of the 5 predominant flavors. So that's sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. This sauce really has all of those, the tomatoes representing some savory and sometimes some sour flavors. That's where if you want, you can add a little bit of lemon for a bit of extra sour. The sun-dried tomatoes have that savory and umami flavor, and the onions bitter, and those beautiful, the other one, the beautiful onions have that little bit of a bitter, and I'm missing one there too, sweet, sour, salty.
Savory. Savory.
Yeah. Savory. Well, the tomatoes have all the savory, sun-dried tomatoes too. So yeah, we're representing all 5 of the flavors in this sauce.
Savory's not a flavor.
Savory's salty.
Thank you.
So we'll blend this up now. If you want, just to decide, if your sun-dried tomatoes are nice and soft, you can add a little bit of texture there. You can leave them in there and let it marinate for a bit and have extra kind of dense, kind of super savory tomatoes, sun-dried tomato bits. So this is getting so thick, I need to use the tamper, which is not a bad thing. Give it a couple pulses. And you might be going, oh my God, Chris, you forgot. There's the cauliflower. But you know what? I didn't forget the cauliflower. What we're going to do, and I like to put my my lid and my tamper right in the bowl because I'm going to be mixing it together anyway. So what I like to do then is the sauce is already in there, and I'm just going to kind of break off little teeny pieces of cauliflower. Here we're dealing with 150 grams of cauliflower. I'm just going to throw that into the blender. And again, just break it into little kind of medium bite-sized pieces. Stem and all can be in there. There we go. And once that's all in there, we'll take the lid and put it back in. Now, if you don't have a Vitamix, one of the things I love about the Vitamix, it has this tamper that I can just put this on a slow speed and push the cauliflower into the blades. If you don't have a tamper and your blender isn't a Vitamix, then what you can do is take a nice sturdy stalk of celery and turn your blender on the lowest speed possible and push it into the blades of the celery. If you don't have a celery, then what you can do is just turn it on, turn it off, and then, you know, when it's off, use a wooden spoon or something like that and push it into the blades, turn it on, turn it off. Or of course, you can just put it on the chopping board and chop it up. This is just a little bit of a quick hack to get your cauliflower into more of a ground texture. So we're going to put this at a low speed, around 4 or 5 at the highest. Turn it on, and then just use that tamper to push it right into the blades. You can leave a couple bigger chunks if you like, just making sure that most of it is pretty uniformly chopped up. And here we have the moment of truth. Can you bring this more into the middle? So check this out. You can see there, it's really thick. And we have all those chunked up little bits of sun-dried tomato and cauliflower. We're just gonna put that right in there. Oh, look at that. could use a spatula or a nice spoon to get every single little bit out. Oh wow, it just smells and looks delicious. How's everyone else doing? Is everyone doing pretty darn good and at the same pace? Crickets. I need a soundboard here. All right. So we're gonna get every little bit out of here. And then all you gotta do is stir it up. Just like Bob Marley said. Stir it up.
Oh, darling.
Ooh, darling, stir it up. There we go. And if you like, you can let it sit for a little bit and all the flavors mingle. If you wanted, you could throw the whole dish in the dehydrator for a little bit to soften up and slightly warm. Or if you're just really hungry and you're ready to go, you could start eating it. But I do want to remind you guys to show us your dishes. If you guys have stirred yours up, yours is all ready like mine, hold it up to the camera, take some beautiful pictures yourself. If it's a little bit messy, you can wipe the edge of your dish off and put a little bit of a garnish on top. I saved a teeny bit of green onion, but instead, like I said, if you have fresh basil or anything like that, even cilantro is really nice in the chili. This is really just a base recipe that is perfect as is, but you can fine tune it. You can make it your own. You know, you could put that cilantro, you could put extra basil, you could put fresh corn kernels in there. If you wanted, you could put a couple, a small handful of pumpkin seeds or a cubed avocado. There's, the sky's the limit. There we go. So once you taste it as well, you can decide, you know what, maybe I want to add a little bit more oregano or a little bit more of the dried basil, whatever you like to do. There we go. So I'm going to top this off with a little bit of the green onion. Boom, boom. Or as Emerald used to say, pow, right? Or boom, pow. I'm not even sure anymore. It's been a while. I haven't seen him. Where did Emerald go?
Lockdown.
So there you go. Look at that. My favorite beautiful raw vegan chili just for you. Or
Bring it closer. Bring it closer.
Or for other people.
And
Look at
wow,
that.
that's gorgeous. Just gorgeous.
Doesn't that look nice?
I love your chilies every single time.
Oh, thank you, brother.
Every
I
time.
tell you, for me, this is like a medium-sized portion. Like I would definitely eat this myself. I might even eat it with a whole bag of organic romaine lettuce and just make chili boats. Just open up a leaf and put chili in there. I may serve it with some lettuce and a bit of avocado and have like chili burritos, so like a leaf of lettuce, a couple scoops of chili and a slice of avocado in there. Just, the sky's the limit. You can choose how you want to eat it. Otherwise, you can just eat it straight up or split it up as a side dish alongside a big salad. Any way you do it is pretty darn good. It's a really hearty, nourishing dish that reminds me of home. So I'm curious, do we have any fun questions or any other insights from you, Doug?
What about adding pineapple for a little punch?
Absolutely. Yeah, you could definitely add some pineapple in there. I've even had little teeny cubed bits of mango in there before, and there's unlimited options. When corn is in season, I really love to shave some corn in there, just kernel the corn, and that can be really darn delicious. Adds a little bit of sweetness as well, and really nice and hearty.
Chris, what do you think really makes chili from your experience?
Well, to me, truthfully, to make it really authentic, it's the chili powder. Of course, all the flavors from all the fresh foods is very important. It makes it really delicious. But to me, if you don't have the chili powder, it just is basically like a tomato sauce. And if you have the chili powder, then for me, at least nostalgia-wise, it tastes like the old homemade chili that my mom used to always make. So that's why I wanted to include that chili powder recipe in case you're somewhere where you can't really find chili powder.
Chris, what are your thoughts about GMO corn?
you know, I'd prefer to avoid it. And that's, you know, generally why I wait until organic corn season. And, you know, GMOs to me isn't strictly a black and white issue, but I have heard specific things with the GMO corn that it's better to avoid.
For
Do you have
sure.
any other insights on that, Dr. Graham?
If my corn isn't organic, I don't want to play with it.
Yeah.
There's too many stories of creatures eating the corn, especially insects and whatnot, eating the corn and then just dying.
Yeah. Yeah. It apparently really disrupts your microbiome, and
it's really hard.
A bunch of stuff.
You know, we're teaching raw food on this show, but as we've mentioned before, it's whole, fresh, ripe, organic plants, and not any one of those is more important than any of the others. We eat everything organic that we possibly can, and sometimes if we can't get organic, then we just don't eat those things, because I mean, grapes, apples, corn, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. The more we learn. And for those of you who haven't heard the theory about GMO and the broad use of glyphosate, that both of which are raising your propensity for coronavirus susceptibility, just so you want to know. I could give you all the science, but that's not this show. But it's definitely a real deal. So I'm going to go organic whenever humanly possible.
Yeah, no, I hear that too. And especially, you know, those ones you mentioned too, for me are like the big ones, actually, the corn and apples and grapes. Grapes, if I eat conventional grapes, I actually get like skin irritation, and my cheeks get all red. So I definitely avoid those every single time as well.
If you wanted to make this a tiny bit more calorie dense, sunflower seeds, or?
Yeah, you know what, actually, one of my personal favorites that I didn't mention is at the same time that I'm pulsing in that cauliflower, I might pulse in a handful of walnuts, you know? Right. Otherwise, I really love pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds. All of those would work really, really well in them. The sunflower seeds are small enough, you could just throw it right in. But the walnuts, preferably, I'd actually pulse them a little bit so that they kind of get into that ground texture. And sometimes I do add, you know, some sliced or cubed avocado, whether I'm making the burrito or if I'm eating it like this. You know, I half to one avocado cubed up and thrown in there, depending upon your portion size, can be really nice as well.
Absolutely.
Chili and guac goes amazingly. That's why, you know, if I'm making the wraps, then usually it is chili and the guac. Otherwise, I might be making a cheese out of organic corn, which can be really delicious as well.
Okay. So I'd go with Larissa's vote on that one. For me to add the sweet taste, I would have used pineapple, just because it's going to combine so much better. But I agree with you completely. If you don't have digestive issues, then one date isn't really going to make a big difference in something that's this tomato rich.
Yeah, so, exactly.
But for people who are sensitive, go with pineapple or kiwi or some acidic fruit in order that's still sweet enough to make it work.
Absolutely. It's all about knowing yourself, right? And running the experiment, or if you know already, then no need to, right? Treat yourself really well, and to your own self be true. Use what works absolutely best for you. I'm just trying to give options and flavors, and, you know, kitchen's nice and fun. We can play and learn, but if something gives you upset, it's not worth continuing.
That's right.
Well, hopefully you're getting some photos being sent to you right away.
Yes,
yeah,
that will be really awesome. So, well, guys, thank you so much for spending this 45 minutes with us. We really enjoy having you and making this delicious, special raw vegan chili with amazing Chef Chris.
That was awesome, Chris. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Bye, Dr. Graham. Bye, Larissa. Love you. Bye, Brian.
Bye.